than drugs or guns. A pound of heroin or an AK-47 can be retailed once, but a young girl can be sold 10 to 15 times a day, and a righteous pimp confiscates 100% of her earnings. Consider this: every 2 minutes a child is exploited in the sex industry. According to USA Today, adult purchase children for sex at least 2.5 million times a year in the United States. Who buys children for sex? Otherwise, ordinary men from all walks of life. They could be your coworker, doctor, pastor, or spouse, writes journalist Steve Swarns, who spent more than a year investigating sex trade in America. In Georgia alone, it is estimated that 7,200 men, half of them in their 30s, seek to purchase sex with adolescent girls each month, averaging roughly 300 a day. On average, a child might be raped by 6,000 men during a 5-year period of servitude. It is estimated that at least 100,000 children, girls and boys, are bought and sold for sex in the U.S. every year, with as many as 300,000 in danger of being trafficked each year. Some of these children are forcefully abducted, others are runaways, and still others are sold into the system by relatives and acquaintances. Human trafficking, the commercial sexual exploitation of American children and women via the internet, strip clubs, escort services, or street prostitution, is on its way to becoming one of the worst crimes in the U.S., said prosecutor Krishna Patel. This is an industry that revolves around cheap sex on the fly with young girls and women who are sold to 50 men each day for $25 apiece, while their handlers make $150,000 to $200,000 per child each year. This is not a problem found only in big cities. It happens everywhere, right underneath our noses, in suburbs, cities, and towns across the nation. As Ernie Allen of National Center for Missing and Exploited Children points out, the only way to find this in any American city is simply to not look for it. Don't fool yourselves into believing this is merely a concern for lower income communities or immigrants. It's not. It's estimated there are 100,000 to 150,000 underage child sex workers in the U.S. These girls aren't volunteering to be sex slaves. They are lured, forced, trafficked into it. In most cases, they have no choice. In order to avoid detection, in some cases aided and abetted by the police, and cater to male buyers, demand for sex with different women, pimps, and the gangs and crime syndicates they work for have turned sex trafficking into a highly mobile enterprise, with trafficked girls, boys, women constantly being moved from city to city, state to state, and to country to country. For instance, the Baltimore-Washington area, referred to as the Circuit, with its I-95 corridor dotted with rest stops, bus stations, and truck stops, is a hub for sex trade. No doubt about it, this is highly profitable, highly organized, and highly sophisticated sex trafficking business that operates in towns, large and small, ranking in upwards up to $9.5 billion a year in the U.S. alone, by abducting and selling young girls for sex. Every year, the girls being bought and sold gets younger and younger. The average age being trafficked is 13. Yet, as the head of a group that combats trafficking pointed out, let's think about what average means. That means children younger than 13. That means 8, 9, 10 years old. For every 10 women rescued, there are 50 to 100 more who are brought in by the traffickers. Unfortunately, they're not 18 to 20-year-olds anymore, noted a 25-year-old victim of trafficking. They're minors as young as 13 who are being trafficked. They're little girls. Where does this appetite for young girls come from? Look around you. Young girls have been sexualized for years now, in music videos, on billboards, in television ads, and in clothing stores. Marketers have created a demand for young flesh and a ready supply of over-sexualized children. All it takes is one look at MySpace photos of teens to see examples. If they are imitating porn they've actually seen, they're imitating porn-inspired images and poses they absorbed elsewhere, writes Jessica Bennett for Newsweek. Latex, corsets, and stripper heels, once the fashion of porn stars, have made their way into middle and high school. This is what Bennett refers to as pornification of a generation. In a market that sells high heels for babies and thongs for tweens, it doesn't take a genius to see that sex, if not porn, has invaded our lives. Concludes Bennett. Whether we become it or not, television brings it into our living rooms, and the web brings it into our bedrooms. According to a 2007 study from the University of Alberta, as many as 90% of boys and 70% of girls aged 13 to 14 have accessed sexually explicit content at least once. In other words, the culture is grooming these young people to be preyed upon by sexual predators. And then we wonder why our young women are being preyed upon, trafficked, and abused. Social media makes it all too easy. As one news center reported, finding girls is easy for pimps. They look on MySpace, Facebook, and other social networks. They and their assistants cruise malls, high schools, and middle schools. They pick them up at bus stops, on the trolley. Girl-to-girl recruitment sometimes happens. Foster homes and youth shelters have also become prime targets for traffickers. Rarely do these girls enter into prostitution voluntarily. Many start out as runaways or throwaways, only to be snatched up by pimps or large sex rings. Others persuaded to meet up with a stranger after interacting online through one of many social networking sites find themselves quickly initiated into their lives as sex slaves. Debbie, a straight-A student who belonged to a close-knit Air Force family living in Phoenix, Arizona, is an example of trading flesh. Debbie was 15 when she was snatched from her driveway by an acquaintance friend. Forced into a car, Debbie was bound and taken to an unknown location, held at gunpoint, and raped by multiple men. She was then crammed into a small dog kennel and forced to eat dog biscuits. Debbie's captors advertised her services on Craigslist. Those who responded, often married and with children, and the money that Debbie earned for sex was given to her kidnappers. The gang raping continued. After searching the apartment where Debbie was held captive, police finally found Debbie stuffed in a drawer under a bed. Her harrowing ordeal lasted for 40 days. While Debbie was fortunate enough to be rescued, others are not so lucky. According to the National Center for Missing Exploited Children, nearly 800,000 children go missing every year, roughly 2,185 children a day. A growing demand for sexual slavery and an endless supply of girls and women who could be targeted for abduction. This is not a problem that's going away anytime soon. For those trafficked, it's a nightmare from beginning to end. Those being sold for sex have an average life expectancy of 7 years. I'm sorry. And those years are a living nightmare of endless rape, forced drugging, humiliation, degradation, threat, disease, pregnancy, abortions, miscarriages, tortures, pain, and always the constant fear of being killed or worse, having those you love hurt or killed. Peter Landsman paint the future horrors of life for those victims of the sex trade in this New York Times article, The Girls Next Door. So what can we do? I'm going to go down here. I can't read any more of that, and I apologize. I maybe shouldn't have read that part, but I will put the rest of it in the show notes and you can read it. Educate yourselves and your children about a growing menace in our communities. Stop feeding the monster. Sex trafficking is a part of a larger continuum in America that runs the gamut from homelessness, poverty, and self-esteem issue to sexualized television, the glorification of a pimp / hoe culture, what is often referred to as the pornification of America, and a billion-dollar sex industry built on the back of pornography, music, entertainment, etc., etc. Yeah, it goes on. Police training and as well as just making yourself aware of these things. I'm sorry, I said I didn't really want to talk about this, but wow. You know, it's I was reading an article a couple weeks ago. It was, I don't remember her name and I don't remember her role in the government. It was a female politician. And she was talking about America's role as far as with Israel and the things we've done, and that America backs Israel. And so therefore, you know, those that bless Israel are blessed, and those that curse Israel are cursed. So since we're a blessing to Israel, that God will bless America. Really? Really? How? How? When we let this go on, how will God not judge America? We hate our children, obviously. When I was little, my mom, with my brother, my twin brother, and I, was very, very protective of us. And I remember it to this day. I was very little, and she was in the rain. We were in a part of town that she wasn't familiar with, and she ended up getting lost. And it was hard to see, you know, street signs with, you know, the wipers going and everything else. And so then the rain began to cease, and she was starting to find her way and realize that we were, you know, what you would consider in the bad part of town or the bad part of the city. And I remember for the first time ever seeing a woman prostitute, a female prostitute, and how she was dressed, and it was shocking to me. I had never seen a woman dressed like that before, ever. It burned into my mind. I remember that it was just so shocking, and I remember my mom was very, you know, because I mean, how do you explain that to your child? It was out of the norm for me to see that. It was out of the norm. It was not normal to see that. Do you understand what I'm saying? I was fast forward to today, I was looking at, everyone posts pictures of their